There were many times when I didn't want to do it because I knew how difficult it was and how hard on the body it was.
And all of that knowledge really pays off. And so this is kind of a deja vu for me reading your book.
One reviewer calls it the Moby Dick of carpeting.
Hi, welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, and we're going to continue our never-ending quest, not only for the perfect pizza, but really our underlying theme of Pizza Quest, which is the celebration of artisanship wherever we find it. It doesn't always have to be in the realm of pizza. There's a lot of universals in pizza, and what we like to do is find out where they kind of coincide and are tangential with other people doing very interesting things that I would say celebrate the artisan spirit. And we usually think, man, it's usually about food, but it doesn't even have to be about food. There are artisans that are craftspeople in all sorts of lives, including carpet installation. My brother is a carpet installer. He works with a legendary carpet guy named Jerry Amadio, and Jerry is in the Philadelphia area. He's sort of legendary, and lo and behold, his son David Amadio joins us today. He is a writer who wrote a novel called Rugman, and the Rugman is there's no subtitle. Rugman, a novel. But the title says it all. David, welcome to Pizza Quest. Let me tell our followers a little bit about you. Creative writing and composition at Lincoln University, America's first degree-granting HBCU, historically Black college. As a young man, you worked part-time for your father's carpet business, cleaning and installing rugs. Your writings appeared in Cleaver, Packingtown Review, Adaption, Talking River, Nerve Cowboy, and the San Francisco Examiner. These are all like creative writing journals, and getting published.
Some of them are.
It's a great resume builder, and you live in suburban Philadelphia, which again is our connection. And you and I go back. We grew up in different parts of Philadelphia, but we have a lot of things in common. Earlier today, we were talking about a pizza place that we've discovered and have had on the show, Ravanisi's, that you haven't been to yet. So we're going to get you over there at some point.
Absolutely.
And Rugman is your first novel, but you teach creative writing. So a lot has happened from your own journey as a kid, kind of apprenticing with your dad, learning how to do carpet, and all of that knowledge really pays off in the pages because you give us a really deep dive into the world of carpet and carpet installation and things we don't think about, like how to properly put staples in so that the grouchy homeowner doesn't get mad about seeing the staples. And I mean, it's really, and as somebody who grew up in the carpet business myself, because my father owned a carpet company, interior design company, including carpet in Germantown. Both of my brothers are in the carpet business. And so this is kind of a deja vu for me reading your book. And also, as I'm reading about the travails of your lead character, Frank, I realize, boy, did I escape a life of bad knees and bad backs. So David, welcome again. And thank you. Can you fill us in a little bit about your journey from those early days to your days now as a teacher of creative writing and all that entails?
Sure. Thank you so much for that introduction, Peter. I really appreciate it. So I grew up in Delaware County, otherwise known as Delco. I went to Upper Darby High School, graduated in '93. Ended up going to Westchester University.
My wife's alma mater.
Go Rams.
And Upper Darby High School was one of our arch rivals in
Absolutely.
sports.
Yeah, in that Central Division. Yeah, I graduated from Westchester in '98 with a BA in literature, British and American literature. But while I was there, I took a couple of creative writing courses and I just fell in love. I mean, I had always written, I had always been a voracious reader too. Kind of got away from it in high school. I kind of became obsessed with sneakers and girls. I didn't really care about writing or reading too much.
A necessary pathway to the future, yes.
When I got to college, that all changed. I took a class with a poet named Christopher Buckley. And, on one of my very first short stories, he commented saying, you can write. You have some talent here. And I needed that confidence boost. So I kind of just went from there, and I ended up applying to a bunch of different graduate programs, like MFA programs. Iowa is the most prestigious, but I ended up going to Bowling Green State University, which is in Northwestern Ohio. That was back in '99. And I got my MFA there, graduated in 2001, did some teaching, kind of bounced around. I went back to Westchester and taught part-time there for a little while.
Nice.
And then Lincoln came calling in 2004. Lincoln is a school out in Chester County. They and Cheney University is another HBCU in the
Cheney.
area.
Yeah. In
Yeah,
fact, I drove right by the gates of Cheney University when I went to Ravanisi's for pizza.
yeah,
And I commented on the fact that when I was a kid, Cheney was like really known for its basketball program.
yeah. Cheney and Lincoln, they've always kind of vied for the title of first HBCU. And I actually think Cheney came along a little bit before. Lincoln was established in 1854. I think Cheney may have been 1837. But Lincoln's the first school to grant degrees. So, yeah, I started there in 2004. It's an amazing place. I've been there for 20 years
20 years.
full time. Yeah, it's a long time at one place. And I was granted tenure a few years back. So I'm an associate professor there. I teach composition, like you said, creative writing courses, screenwriting. I teach a class in literary magazine publishing. We work on like a little campus arts magazine every spring,
Fantastic.
which is always fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a labor of love. It's a passion
Yes.
that I put a lot of time and effort into. And during the school year, it's tough to find time to write. So summers are really when I hunker down and I do the majority of my writing. We get a nice winter break too. Like the
Yeah.
beginning of December, the semester ends, and then we have the month of December, a little bit of January. So I'll try to squeeze some writing in then, but it's mostly during the summer months where I'm working strictly primarily on my own stuff. And I started writing Rugman back in, I guess it was 2015, like the end of 2015. And it took me about, 5 years to complete it, 5, 6 years. And, I sent it out to a couple of different publishing houses, and I got lucky. There was a house, kind of like a middle of the road press in Philly called Paul Dry Books. And Paul Dry, the gentleman who runs it, is a true mensch. He's just an amazing guy. He loved the book, and he's the one who brought it out into the world. But you were talking about how when you introduced me, how I used to work for my dad. So when I was a part-time professor at Lincoln, I would teach 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursday, and then the other
Yeah.
3 days I would be on my hands and knees, out on the main
You
line,
were you were
picking
still
him
out
up,
there, yeah, paying the bills basically.
paying the bills because teaching the salary wasn't enough, the gig wasn't paying enough, so I had to supplement my income. And the old man, that job was always there for us to fall back on. There were many times when I didn't want to do it because I knew how difficult it was and how hard on the body it was, how taxing physically, but I had to support the family, had to put food on the table. So yeah,
Yeah.
I did it. I did it because I had to do it. But you know what? It also kind of felt good because it's a family business. It goes back to 1952. My great uncle started it. So I felt like I was, paying homage. It was almost a tribute to all those older Amadio men who had also kind of gone through the wars. It was my way to honor them by
Honor them.
doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And fortunately you had the vocabulary and the skill set and the history to be able to tell that story
Hmm.
with credibility. It wasn't, just sort of an outsider looking in.
Yeah.
It really felt like I was getting an insider's look. Almost, there were times I'm going, do I really want to know this much about carpets? But you do. And I think that was one of the noteworthy things that I'm sure you talk about this when you're teaching creative writing is the
Hmm.
importance of detail, of being
Oh
able
yeah.
to describe things accurately and take the reader, deep into your world and bring that world alive to them. And I thought that you did a great job on this book. I was very impressed
Thank
with
you.
the quality of writing.
One reviewer calls it the Moby Dick of carpeting. This guy Peter Crimmins, he works for WHYY.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. He came to my dad's shop over in Upper Darby. He interviewed my dad. He interviewed me. He had a photographer there taking pictures. They did a spot that aired on the radio. It's also online. Yeah, and he's the one who called it the Moby Dick of carpeting because of the high level of detail. The fact that I describe all this stuff that no one would ever think to describe. But again, that was my way of honoring the work. There's something almost religious about what my dad does, and I wanted the reader to be able to observe what I had observed because, I'm not a carpet installer. I'm a writer. My dad is a blue collar genius. He
Yeah.
is a master carpet installer. But there was always a point on a job where my skills stopped and, I couldn't do anymore. And that's when I would kind of sit back in the cut and watch. And I would record things in my notebooks, not just about what he was doing, but about everything around me, including the customers, and their
Yeah.
houses and their pets and all this stuff, like the circus that sometimes takes place
It's funny because
around the world.
I made a note of that. The some of the characters in the book included a pet dog, who's an
Uh-huh.
important, a small but important character, in the story at
Hmm.
the time, and the relationship that Frank has to have with his general contractor, his
Uh-huh.
co-workers, but the owner of the house, the architect, the designer, who's
Yeah.
high maintenance, and there's all sorts of well, you in putting a book together, and it's not a long book, it's under 200 pages, and yet
Hmm.
it's chock full. It's like a full meal, of stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess finding that balance, and this is probably the craft of the writing side for you, is finding that balance between giving enough detail and keeping the story moving forward.
That's always an issue because I could spend pages and pages lovingly romantically describing, the pattern in a rug. However, you have to be mindful of the
Yeah,
reader's patience, right? You've got to keep the story moving. Plot
right.
is something that you cannot forget as a writer. So at some point, I have to pull myself up out of the nap and keep things going, right? Action, forward momentum. That stuff's really, really important. And that's the balance you have to strike as a writer. I do want to be as poetic as possible. I want the reader to appreciate what my dad does and the materials that he uses and the tools as well. All of that stuff is very, very important. But his story is important as well. His character arc, the development of the plot, the conflict, the class struggle, the tension, all that stuff is important as well. So yeah, you have to find the balance. And it's like when you're putting together or you're kneading dough. There's a balance of ingredients that go into the construction and the composition of that dough, so it tastes
Yeah.
great. This some of the same principles apply to the writing of a story or a novel.
Well, it's very analogies are very obvious that in the and we've seen this with people we've interviewed on Pizza Quest, that no matter what their craft is, that there's a lot of parallels and similarities that everyone needs to understand. And in the case of your story, well, let me backtrack a little bit. A friend of
Hmm.
mine who's a poet many, many,
Hmm.
many years ago told me about a type of poetry that she called object poetry, and
Yeah.
the purpose was, if I remember correctly, was just to write deeply about a particular thing. It could be an apple, it could be anything,
Yeah.
and not use adjectives and metaphors, but to talk about the thing itself and go as
Yeah.
deep into the thing itself until it opened up into another world where
Yeah.
you didn't have to kind of make obvious analogies and parallels, but the reader got it without you
Yeah.
having to do it. And I thought that was really cool. And in a sense, that's what happens as you're describing the carpet, the knots in a
Yeah.
rug, and how
Hmm.
they can be untied and tied back, or where how to well, I'll let you explain it more later,
How to
but how to
sew.
install things.
Sewing. Yeah. And
The sewing
installing.
side of it, yeah, which again, Frank, your character is really like sort of a master of that. And
He
then
is.
the other thing that's going on in the story. So in telling that, you
Hmm.
kind of have created a world in
Yeah.
which we enter. And then as you're telling the rest of the story just you don't have to you don't have to work too hard to bring the reader into drawing the connections between their own world, which may not have
Hmm.
anything to do with carpet, and the world of Frank and his zany cast of characters in the
Yeah.
story. One of the challenges, first thing I noticed was, well, there's a great upstairs downstairs drama going
Oh,
on
there's
here.
a Downton Abbey thing going on for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
and you've got all these the blue collar guys working in the house, and then you got the
Hmm.
rich homeowners, and then the
Hmm.
people in between who want to act like the rich homeowner. I mean, so you created it's very, you talk about analogies. It's a lot like Downton Abbey, and yet here
Yeah.
it is in suburban Philadelphia where all this is taking place,
Yeah. It's out
and
there on
and
the
then
main line in Villanova. Hmm.
right in my childhood
Yeah.
backyard. So the other thing is that I noticed, and this is again something that anybody who's working out in the world, whether they have a pizza shop or
Hmm.
restaurant or a business of any sort, is finding qualified, talented people to work with you and how hard that is.
Yes,
So Frank, who takes his work so seriously,
yes,
is burdened by having these two like doofus,
yeah.
sidekicks who are
Schlubs,
working with him.
schlubs.
Clubs. Yes. Thank you. The right word, finding the right word. So there's, that part of the story is kind of going
Yeah,
on simultaneously to then the immigrant issues, finding,
yes,
within that immigrant community, especially the undocumented immigrant community that are trying to stay in the shadows but still need to put food on their table,
yep,
and finding some talent there, as opposed to the local kids who just want to get paid, go to the bar,
yeah,
drink, or buy some drugs,
yep.
and the contrast there. So all that's happening in just a very tightly packed 200
Yeah,
pages.
that's all there. And my dad has struggled. He doesn't as much anymore since partnering up with Havertown. Things have been a lot better. But when he was on his own, when it was just Ascot Carpets, yeah, it was a revolving door of kind of second fiddles and lackeys and guys who just couldn't cut it and guys who were addicted to drugs and guys who were alcoholics and guys who, weren't showing up on time, weren't showing up at all. And that's why my brother and I decided that we needed to help him because he was having such a hard time finding good help. And yeah, the industry itself, the carpet industry is bottom of the barrel. It's like very low on the totem pole. Even guys, like carpenters and electricians, they look down on the carpet guys because the industry itself has such a bad reputation. And there's kind of like a mythical character in there called the carpet ape, like the guy who came before
The
and did
carpet
all
ape.
like the crappy
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Frank,
The guy whose work you're trying to fix, and
yes,
you're paying the
Frank's
price
gonna
for his bad work. Yeah.
yes, Frank has to remedy all of his, his problems and his issues and his mistakes. So, part of laying carpet is, yes, you've got to rip up that previous job. And that sometimes consumes so much of your energy and your patience, you have like nothing left when you actually have to put the carpet in. Yeah. So what happens to Frank in the book is very similar to what happened to my dad. He lost two of his guys at a very crucial moment.
You're
And
right.
my brother and I stepped in to help. But in the story, it's this guy named Edgar. He is a character that I've actually written about before. And when I talk to people about the book, they love him. He's a beloved character. This is a guy, like you said, an undocumented immigrant who is almost magical in the way
Yeah.
that he comes in and helps Frank. And he possesses the skill. He has the ability. And it may be that this guy is the future of the trade. It's not, these kind of native born Delconians who just want to get high. It's this guy who really understands sacrifice and family and the meaning of hard work.
Yeah. There's very soulful quality,
Yeah.
about him. And in a sense, another aspect of the story that it touches on is the lineage of mentor to protege and here is Frank having no one to pass on this lifelong set of wisdom and skills that
Mm-hmm.
that he learned from his mentor, who was
Yep.
what his was it his uncle or
Uncle. Yeah, his
his
uncle.
uncle who's in the
Mm-hmm.
book, and a character also that he learned from. But
Mm-hmm.
where does it end with me? That's a big question.
Yeah.
And this is something that so many people I know are facing today,
Yeah.
especially if they're working in the realm of craft work of some
Yeah.
sort. There was this brotherhood that appears in the story too, of between the carpet layers and the plumbers and the other unsung heroes that are, and putting the house together, that will be, when
Mm-hmm.
the house is done, they're going to be gone and forgotten, but without them it wouldn't have happened. And there's this kind of a mutual respect that seems to happen at that level among some of them. And then there's what would you call it, the pecking order of
Yeah.
the guys, like you said, who look down
Yeah.
on, whether it could be the house painter, it could be the
Yeah.
the carpet guy, the plumber. Other people are looking down on them, even though they're making their jobs possible.
Yeah, the general contractor in the story hates Frank. His name's Vic.
Yeah,
There's a lot of tension between those two characters, and
he
they
kind of
almost
comes
come to
off as
blows.
the antagonist, the main antagonist in the book.
Yeah, he's definitely a villain. Connie Silverstein, who owns the house, is also a villain. The decorator sometimes could be viewed as antagonistic, but she ends up kind of coming around and helping him in the end. Yeah, there is a brotherhood, there is a camaraderie, but like you said, Frank's son in the novel, he doesn't want what Frank has. He doesn't want to become a carpet installer. He kind of resists it. He lives a different life. And I decided to go a different way in my life. Yes, I worked for my dad, but I didn't want to take over the business, right? When he was
Yeah.
looking for somebody to sell to, my brother Matt didn't want it. My brother Mark also didn't want it, and I didn't want it. And I felt guilty about that, because here's this man who has this incredible store of knowledge. I'm not going to use that as my bread and butter. I'm not going to make that my career or my vocation. But here in this book, I can acknowledge that. I can recognize this man's contribution and his genius, this guy who has kind of lived in the shadows, kind of unremarkably his whole life doing this work, this brilliant work. He deserves kind of like a moment in the sun. And I almost wept when that reporter came to the warehouse and was talking to my dad. I was just standing kind of in the wings watching, like, this is the most beautiful thing to see
But
my
that's a story. You're referring to a story that came out after the
yeah,
book.
like here's this man who was finally getting his due, right? Finally getting his due. That felt really good for me. It was a way to kind of compensate for
Yeah.
not having taken over the business. Yeah.
Well, I got lucky in that regard because I didn't, like you, I did not want to go into the family business. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to, go into the interior design business. But fortunately for me, my middle brother, Fred, was interested, and he decided that he would
Great.
take, get involved. And so he ended up working very closely with my dad. My younger brother, Harry, who then became part of the team and was a carpet
Yeah.
installer. They both got the benefit from, in a sense, this lineage of knowledge and wisdom that
Mm-hmm.
our elders had to pass on. We're going to do a
Yeah.
whole show on this coming up in a couple of weeks on the whole role of and the importance of eldership and elderhood and passing knowledge on from generation to generation.
Yeah.
And
What's your
so anyway,
legacy going to be? Yeah.
but my brothers took a lot of pressure off of me because I didn't have
Yeah.
to feel as guilty for abandoning, but I also missed out on the years of being able to work closely with my dad, who had a lot that he wanted to pass on to me before he
Yeah.
left.
My brother and I, my brother Matt, who's my youngest brother, we spent a lot of time together with my father. And my bond with my brother Matt is very, very close as a result of having worked with him so closely. Our relationship, our brotherhood is what got us through so many trying and difficult times because we could make fun of the crazy homeowner. We could make fun of the pushy decorator. We could make fun of, the kind of dictatorial general contractor and the comedy. And there's a lot of comedy in the book, the things that happen to these guys while they're in this house. And a lot of that stuff happened to us. And keeping it light is what kept us from sinking because there were many times where we just kind of wanted to roll over and die because of how tough the work can be.
Yeah, and if you can't make light of it, then it becomes a
Oh,
weight that can destroy you, really.
yep, you're
Viktor
screwed.
Frankl talks about that, how you have to be able to make light of the
Yeah.
struggles and suffering of your life, or else it will destroy you.
I've used comedy throughout my life to kind of temper and tamp down, to kind of neutralize, to lighten, to make sense of things. It's an armor, it's a shield, it's a coping mechanism. And, I took a lot of that struggle and that strife and that pain that I experienced working with my dad, and I tried to convert it into something that would please somebody else. Like I tried to convert that into art, and that's what point of view does. That's what perspective does. The
Yeah.
comedic perspective, the dramatic perspective, whatever it may be. You transmute that pain or that struggle into something that can be enjoyed by somebody else, and it's also therapeutic for you to kind of get it out.
That's fine. I was thinking the exact same word, transmute, before you said
Yeah.
it. That's really the maybe the greatest value of being an artist or being a creative person, whether it's music, writing, poetry, you name it,
Yeah.
filmmaking, is basically you get a chance to take the things that are going on, the things that are roiling around in your inner
Mm-hmm.
being, and turn them into something, create something that in a way kind of tries to make sense. It helps make sense for you of
Yeah,
why
you're
all
making
that happened.
meaning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
give it
you're
meaning.
making meaning by telling the story. And if you don't do that, you can go through your life not really reflecting on what has happened, and you're not kind of giving yourself instructions for how to, deal with things in the future. Storytelling has so many functions, therapeutic and cathartic functions. But yeah, you're taking the raw materials of life and you are transforming them into something beautiful, something artistic, something good that others can enjoy and learn from as well. And, I've done book clubs with people and they've talked to me about, what the book means to them. And something that a lot of people talk about is their legacy. I go, these book clubs are mostly older women. There are no like book clubs for men. It's mostly older. And I asked them,
That's
like,
right.
what's your legacy going to be based on Frank's difficulties, kind of handing down his legacy to his son. And they all talk about, how they want their children to kind of preserve, their memory. So it is a book about that. It's a book about many things. And I'm not quite sure how I packed all that stuff into 188 pages. I had to be super economical and efficient about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm envisioning a book now that's going to be much, much bigger, probably like, on the order of maybe, 300 to 400 pages. So I hope that it doesn't get away from me.
Do you see bringing Edgar back in a future book?
I don't know. I would love to bring Edgar back, but if I can't bring Edgar back, there's always going to be a character like Edgar.
Like Edgar. Yeah.
Yeah, because that he's very, very special to me. Like I said, I've written about him before, and I wanted to kind of give him some spotlight as well. So if he doesn't show up, somebody much like him will definitely reappear in my fiction.
So before we talk a little bit more about the story of the book itself, let's back
Yeah.
to your creative process. So, I went through an MFA program as well. I don't know if in your search, if you stumbled upon Queens, I don't know if Queens University had their Queens in
Okay.
Charlotte has an MFA program and
Nice.
where I live. And it was actually started by a guy who grew up in Penn Valley.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I ended up going there, and just a couple of years after you went through yours. I don't know if the
Okay.
Queens program existed back in '99 or not, but anyway, and a lot of things we talk about are some of the things you touched on, the craft of how to properly tell a story,
Mhm.
and how you lay your themes out. Can you talk? And then you also talked about some of these themes that you're writing
Mhm.
about, and wondering, since you're teaching students who
Yeah.
are creative writing students themselves, if you're finding any talent and receptivity, the ability to pass on now what
Yes.
you've learned, your craft,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
another generation of hopefully hungry creative people.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I started out taking some creative writing courses at Westchester, writing fiction, writing poetry. Got that boost and that encouragement from the poet Chris Buckley, and then some subsequent professors as well. And when I went to Bowling Green, it was a 2-year program. I was out there all by myself, and I had nothing to do but write. So I really cut my teeth out there as a writer. I was able to produce a lot. I generated a lot of material. Looking back on it, it wasn't very good, but I needed to go through that initial kind of apprenticeship phase. And that apprenticeship phase lasted for a while. I graduated in 2001. I did not publish the book until many, many years later. It was 2023 when it came out. I had published some stories here and there, but nothing substantial. And, what happened to me is I got back from Bowling Green and I started to write comedic sketches and screenplays. So
Oh,
I taught myself how to do that. And in reading all these books about screenwriting, I read a book called Story by this guy named Robert McKee, which
I took his
really,
workshop.
oh, did you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
three
that book's
three day
amazing.
intensive. It was life changing.
Yeah, and it's a really great book if you want to learn about structure, right? So
Yeah,
structure was something that I didn't really have. Like I had Freytag's pyramid, everybody kind of has that, the traditional linear chronological diagram of plot, but I didn't really have a deep understanding or appreciation of structure until I read Story and until I wrote a number of feature-length screenplays.
yeah.
And then I felt like I was able to then write a novel because I had done that work as well. I had done that apprenticeship. So I always kind of had the ability to use language in poetic ways, lyrical ways, suggestive and metaphoric ways. But I didn't really have that understanding of structure and how important it is to the experience, like the reading
And so,
experience.
so basically, what I'm hearing is you had the raw talent, but you didn't quite have the framework to hang it on.
No, and you need that vessel. You really do, right? You've got to have some kind of framework, a paradigm, not a formula, but some kind of paradigm. This is what Sid Field talks about. He wrote a book called Screenplay, which I've read
Screenplay.
more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have that vessel. You have to have that container. You've got tons of ideas. You've got subject matter. You've got themes. But if you don't have structure, if you don't have some sort of way to organize it and order it and arrange it in a way that is logical and understandable and digestible, you don't really have much of anything. You kind of just have
Right.
the material, but you don't have the form. right? You have the content, but not the form. Those two things need to be inseparable.
And again, kind of drawing the analogy to the story in Rugman,
Mhm.
here's Frank who has innately learned the structure of his craft, and he's got two schlubs who don't
Yep.
who don't care about that kind of stuff. How can he teach them anything if they're not willing to start with the most fundamental element of the
Yeah.
structure of how to properly install a carpet?
And going back to the question you asked about my current students, so what Chris Buckley did for me when I was an undergrad at Westchester, I do the same thing for my students. Every once in a while, a student will come along who has the gift, who possesses the talent and the ability, and I feel like I need to say to them, "You have it. Do something with it. Do not neglect this. Respect this. Honor this." So I'll just make a little note, on their stories or their poems to, to ride with this and cultivate it, hone it. Do what you need to do. And I feel like that's a way to kind of continue the legacy of my professor who saw that light in me. And, I'm up there talking the talk, I'm up there telling them about all of these things. And the one thing that I stress to them more than anything is what you talked about earlier, writing objectively, writing about things. So there's this poet, his name is William Carlos Williams. He's
Oh yeah,
from Paterson, New Jersey.
one of the
And his
greats.
whole philosophy was no ideas but in things. So he was very insistent upon kind of examining, those everyday things in your life and writing about those, because contained in those things you've got truth, right? You have like a message. There is something in there. You don't need to rely on abstractions and generalities and kind of vague, like you said, adjectives. Just focus on the thing itself, and that will come to represent those abstractions for the reader. So that is central to my philosophy as a writer, and that's something that I teach my students. Some of them pick up on it, some of them don't, but I continue to teach it because I think it's vital.
Well, it's exciting to know that you occasionally come upon a student who's got
Yeah,
the goods, an Edgar who you
they're
can work
still
with.
out there.
Now you're giving me something to work with here.
Yes, Edgar is out there. He is definitely out there. He shows up every now and again. He manifests himself in different forms, and real recognizes real. You can kind of see it in somebody. And again, I feel like I need to notify that student, let them know, yes, you got it. Do something with it. This is a good thing you have.
Well, it's exciting. Number one, I know what it feels like when you get a student, or if you get a protege, or if you get somebody
Yeah,
who you feel like, hey, it's been worth it. I have someone I can pass this on to.
yeah,
And I know,
feels great.
and by the way, for those who are listening, your dad is still working. He's still working.
He's
He's
still
working at a
at it.
place called Haverford Carpet, which is where my brother still works,
He's
and
there.
and he's still doing it. But in the story itself, getting back to the story, because
Yeah,
I want to be able to tell a little bit without any
sure,
spoilers, but
sure.
certainly you do a lot of foreshadowing in the early part of the book about, you get this feeling something's going to happen to this guy's body, because
Yeah.
you make mention a number of times you've planted sort of the seed of, you know, the body's going to betray you sooner or later if you stay in this job long enough.
Yeah.
And just when you think he's, kind of out of the woods, it all comes back to, land on him.
It all comes crashing down. Yep.
So, so can you talk just without, again, without,
Yeah.
because I want our listeners to get this book and read it so they
Yes.
can enjoy it and not know how it all kind of plays out. But it's partly in the art and craft of telling the story that you get the joy of reading. So even if you know a
hmm
little bit about it, it's not going to ruin this for you, because you want to be able to,
hmm
savor every bite. But what happens? What's the story that's going on there with Frank?
So he's got a pain in his leg, which he thinks is like maybe a pulled hamstring or something, and he ends up going to a chiropractor. And the guy, it's a rather funny scene where the guy uses a thumper on the back of his leg to kind of massage, the strain and the stress away, and it feels good for a little bit, but it kind of, it wears off the therapeutic effects. What happens to Frank is not too dissimilar from what happened to me when I was working with my dad. I herniated a disc in my back, which causes sciatica to go down your leg. And you think it's your leg, but really it's something going on in your back. And you can have no back pain at all, but the source of the pain is this disc that is smashing up against the nerve, your sciatic nerve, and causing this kind of ringing pain in your leg.
And it's going shoot straight. As soon as you were describing it in the book, I'm going, oh my God, I know exactly what that feels
Yes,
like. And at sciatica.
it's very common. It's very common. And me, I was doing my father's work with my mother's back. I'm built like my mother. I'm not built like my dad. My dad's built like a Sherman tank. He's a behemoth. He just has this like this bearish body where he can take on anything, lift. And I'm lifting 350-pound rugs on my shoulder and carrying them up 3 flights of steps to an attic in a house with no air conditioning in like the dog days of summer. Sooner or later, my back was going to give out, which is what happened to me. And something similar happens to Frank, and it lands him in a spot where he's got to decide, like, all right, what am I going to do with the rest of my days? Like, am I going to continue working and perhaps jeopardize my body? Or do I maybe think about selling the business, or like maybe I can sell carpet, which is a suggestion that his son makes. So he's kind of left with this question in the novel. And I'm not going to give, I'm not going to say anything else about it. But yeah, the work definitely has an effect. It impacts your body physically. And there are guys who have been doing it forever. And I don't know how my dad's still going. I think he's just made differently. He's had some issues here and there, like with his knees. He had arthroscopic.
He never had to crash and burn like Frank did.
No, never anything like what happened to me. And after my back surgery in 2010, I actually went back to carpet laying because I had no choice, because I was still working part-time. So I recovered. I went back. Haven't had anything happen, too crazy. So my dad has had arthroscopic knee surgery on one knee. I think it was like many years ago, but that's it. He's got pain, and eventually he's probably going to retire, but he's always kind of been, it's almost like he was meant for it. He was almost like designed to do it.
And Frank, the character that he's based on, he refuses to wear the knee pads that every other carpet guy uses, right?
Yeah. He's hardcore. He's hardcore.
And
my dad was like that.
Some people just are built, like you say, they're built differently. Some people can handle that, and we don't know why. And other people they do everything exactly right according to the book, and they crash and burn sooner.
Yeah. No, he never wore knee pads, and we made fun of people who wore knee pads. We would laugh at those guys like, oh, that dude's weak, that dude's soft. Yeah. My dad's just he's like a machine. Yeah. He's a true,
and he still enjoys what he's doing after all these years.
He does. He still derives benefit from it. For him, it's a form of meditation almost. Like it's a form of a prayer. And work for me is that way. When I write, it's a form of meditation. You're focusing, concentrating solely on this one thing. You're doing one thing at a time. My dad is not easily distracted. He's from a different time. Technology doesn't get in the way. He is laser focused on this one thing, and he can put all of his energy, his talent, his skill into that. And it does almost feel like a ritual, like a religious ritual. That's why I describe it in such detail. I'm kind of marking each step of the way to hold it up for the reader as if it were a kind of ceremony.
Well, that comes across, and I think that's one of a parallel that we see in the artisan community. Just using pizza as our analogy, the same story that you're talking about. There are people that are. I know a guy who's in his 90s right now, still works the line at his son's pizzeria in Las Vegas. They moved from Jersey or from New York to Vegas, and they're doing it. But he just gets so much joy and derives so much connection with a sense of purpose in his life to just be there doing it. And his son, who's my age in his 70s, is still working it and still doing it. And the thing is that when you ask him, why do you do it? He says, it's because I still love it. I still look forward every day to coming in and doing it. It doesn't get old for me.
Yeah.
And there's so few people that can say that, number one, but it's I think something that everybody yearns for, to be able to say something like that.
And now, my dad's probably the only guy in southeastern Pennsylvania. I don't want to say all the Mid-Atlantic, who knows how to do what he does. Right? He possesses this skill that is rare. It's a dying art. So he feels like he has value. He feels like he has significance, and he does. He truly does. It's not just a feeling. He is viewed by others in the industry as being like a paragon, as a guy who kind of doesn't stand above in a pompous or arrogant way, but has achieved a certain level of mastery and artistry, and he's respected for that. I think that makes him feel really good.
Has he had any luck in finding a new generation of interested talent, or is it just a dying art?
So there are some guys at Havertown who do what my dad does, who are really good with the binders and the sewing machines. As far as like the hand sewing, I'm not sure if he's found an apprentice or, a protege, like you said, somebody to mentor. But I know that there are guys there who are doing some of that work that my dad has always done. So I don't think once he retires, I don't think it's going to completely go away. I think he will have handed down enough of his genius that these other guys will carry on the mantle and give it to even the next generation beyond them.
Or maybe somebody will read your book and go, wait a minute, this speaks
Wow.
to me. How how
So
how nice would that be to come full circle?
my son, who's 20, he has expressed interest in working with my dad. He has worked with him here and there, like
Well,
part-time on a couple of jobs.
yeah.
And I would be fully supportive of him. If he doesn't want to go to college, if he wants to enter the trades and use his hands either as a carpenter or a carpet installer, whatever it may be, I think that would be amazing.
Well, the thing is that everybody's looking for something. Everybody's looking for something to be able to sink their teeth into. Some people need to flit from job to job to job until they, it might take them 20, 30 years before they find that thing that
Yep.
scratches the itch. But some
Mm-hmm.
people find it early in life, and
Mm-hmm.
we're all on a different timetable. So I
Yeah.
think so, and you're playing your role in a sense of
Yeah.
giving
I kind of I got the
pathway.
itch when I was young. I got the itch to write when I was very young. I was probably, in maybe second or third grade. And my mother went to the parent teacher conference. After recess every day, we would write in our little journals,
Yeah.
and the teacher said to my mother, like, the other kids write like, two sentences. Your son writes 2 pages every single. So it's always been kind of coming out of me. So I finally found, the container for all of for like
The,
to catch the spewing geyser. Yeah,
right. The writing was on the wall at an early
it
age.
was there.
But let me ask
Always
you this:
there.
when you were at Upper Darby High School, isn't that
Yeah,
the same high school that Tina Fey went to?
Tina Fey went there. Jamie Kennedy, Jim Croce, Todd
Jim
Rundgren, a
Croce.
lot
Wow,
of lot
a
of
lot of
famous
a lot of
alums.
talented folks went through that high school.
Yeah,
It's
man.
the
I took
Beverly Hills High School of the East.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I'm telling you. I'm telling you,
anyway,
there's
when you
a
were
lot of
there,
talent.
did you work on the school newspaper
I
or any of
did. I worked
the
on the Acorn, it was called. So for a couple of years, I was a reporter for the Acorn. I think it was like 10th and 11th grade, maybe. And then I checked out again. I became interested in girls and sneakers. So I said, I'm not going to do anything academic or corny or smart. That's not cool.
you entered your wild oat years?
I did. I had to sow them. I
Yeah,
became obnoxious and yeah, reckless and rebellious. Everybody goes through that phase. Yeah. So
I
yeah, and
read a passage.
there was a great teacher at Upper Darby named Terrence McGovern. I had him for creative writing and techniques of research. So like one part of the year we were writing research papers, and the other part we were writing stories. So he was very, very hard on me, and he really pushed me because he knew that there was a part of me that kind of was making light of everything, and I wasn't taking myself and my talent seriously. And he was another person who kind of gave me that nudge that I needed, and he treated me, I think, like I needed to be treated, with a little bit of tough love. So I had
Interesting.
an opportunity there to write, which was great.
That's cool. And again, people come into our lives for short periods of time, long periods of time, who can help us get to the next rung of the ladder of our own journey.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it
They're
sounds
the
like your journey is still, you're
facilitate.
still young and kind of in the early, I would say the early middle stage of yours. You found your path, but where do
Yeah,
you see it going? Where do you see yourself in 4 or 5 years? Do you envision yourself being able to can be a full-time writer and just do the James Michener thing and just
man,
leave academics and just do it?
that's the dream,
That's the
right?
dream, right?
That's the dream, to be
Or are
able
you
to
still
write
writing
full time.
screenplays? Are you doing screenplays?
Peter, I do a little bit of everything. I write novels, of course. I'm always kind of working on academic stuff. You have to present at conferences, so writing these kind of long 20-page papers, right? I'm also still doing the comedy. I'm in a comedy troupe with a couple
Oh,
of guys that I graduated from college with. We've been
how
doing it
cool.
since 2001. Yeah, so I'm still writing
Are
sketches,
you
and
performing? You guys performing in the area?
we haven't. It was life kind of catches up, kids, and we used to perform a lot in the aughts and through the 2010s.
Yeah, yeah.
But right now we're kind of just focusing on maybe doing one or two short films like every 4 or 5 years, and it's good because it kind of keeps those juices flowing. I do music with my brother. I've got my hands on a lot of different bags, but yeah, the dream is to be able to write full time, to not have to teach, but writing doesn't pay the bills unless you are pumping out a book like every year,
Right.
unless you're a James Patterson, And there are some people who write serious literary fiction, who sell copies, they're commercially successful, they don't have to teach. But a lot of people who are writing literary fiction, like myself, they have to teach, right? So they're teaching at MFA programs, or they're teaching
That's
undergrads,
right.
creative writing courses. So, and I like teaching. I really enjoy it. It's a big part of my identity and who I am. So I think I'll continue doing that. If my next book sells like hotcakes and
Yeah.
I can retire early from teaching, that would be great. If not, I can kind of keep rocking the way that I have been until I retire from teaching, and then I'll have even more time to write. And I'm about halfway, a little bit more than halfway through my next novel, and I've already kind of started researching the third one. So there's stuff in the queue for sure. And I don't know if the dream's ever going to come true, but one can continue
Well, you
to
got to keep
fantasize.
dreaming it. It'll come
Yeah.
true if you keep dreaming. But also, have you ever thought about turning Rugman into a screenplay? It would make a great independent. I see it as an independent film.
Yeah, I would. If somebody contacted me, like a production company, and said, "Hey, we want to buy the rights to this," and that's what a lot of writers also kind of dream about. Like, "Hey, this could be a really nice payday." It's not about money, but it's always nice to be compensated for the work that you've done. I would totally write. I would totally adapt that into a screenplay with the assurance that I would have the opportunity to write the screenplay. I wouldn't farm that out to anybody else. I wouldn't want to outsource that.
Well, you have to pull the Sylvester Stallone thing. You gotta
Yeah.
write it and say, and I want to play.
Yeah. You got to strong arm them.
But if you don't dream it, it's not going to happen. But I think that well, you fall in the category of what we call a creative, a person. There's a whole category of people called creatives, and creatives gather regularly to share their dreams with each other and spur each other on to other things.
Yeah.
And so, I'm excited for you, but I also have the sense from talking to you that even if your books start to sell and you start, moving up into another echelon of being able to support yourself through writing alone, that you're never going to get too far away from also teaching and mentoring and wanting to make a difference in other people's lives.
And I'm never going to get too far from, the salt of the earth. I'm never going to get too far from, what's always grounded me and what's humbled me and kept me human. Because that's the source of my work. That's the source of my fiction. So I'll never get too far away from that. And yeah, I always will be teaching. I guess I've always kind of been a teacher in a way. I didn't come into that until I got to Lincoln. Lincoln really taught me how to be a teacher. Those students, they turned me into a teacher. I really hadn't been much of one before I got there. So yeah, even if I do, achieve the dream, I don't think I'll ever fully forget my responsibility to kind of teach and, impart ideas and lessons and knowledge, instructions, whatever they may be.
Well, it's so fulfilling. I think the teaching in general as a career, as a path, not every teacher gets the opportunity to write and do creative work outside of teaching. Teaching itself is its own fulfillment. I've taught for 35 years and I love it. And fortunately, like yourself, I've had a parallel life, trying to be a creative, and both of them give me equal amount of joy. And it's nice to always have the other to fall back on when the well is dry, and in the one on the left, you go to the one on the right. But it's satisfying. And in the end, I think that's really what we're talking about today is, finding a sense of purpose and meaning in life through whatever you're doing, whether it's an art or craft, like sewing carpet and installing carpet, or recreating music and art and films. It's all about finding purpose in life. And it sounds like you're well on your way. So thanks and congratulations for, for getting through those wild oach years and finding your path.
Well, you know what corrected me. I was 16. I was down the shore. My parents have a summer home right near Atlantic City in Ventnor, New Jersey.
That's where
I would go down. I would go down there for the whole summer. It was great. And I had a double life down there. And I that's where I did all like the bad stuff. Like that's where I did all the dirt down there. And I got in trouble.
That's where you were 16. Danny Zuko down in Atlanta.
Straight up, I was Danny Zuko to the team. And I went Danny Zuko, like full Danny Zuko when I was 16. And I got in serious trouble. I got arrested. And the way that my dad rectified the behavior was he brought me back to Delco, brought me back home and made me work. He's
Ah,
like, I'm going to put you to work.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
gonna you're gonna lay tactless stripping in this house, and this is gonna show you what it's all about. And from that point on, I was very well behaved. I left. I was like when Danny Zuko shows up with like the sweater on when he's like
Right,
trying to look up.
right. Well, he got lucky because he found Olivia Newton-John,
Yes,
but
yes,
you
yes.
gotta have a Sandy.
And it's weird. Like the thing that was used to punish me, all those years ago, then became the source of my fiction, which is now giving people, pleasure when they read it.
I got one
It's
question
crazy.
before we're going to have to wrap it up, but I want to
Yeah,
ask you.
yeah.
You mentioned Chris Buckley at some point as being an important person in your life, somewhat
Mhm.
of a mentor. There's a number of Chris Buckleys that are known out there. Is he a poet, a
He's a
writer?
poet. He's a
And, and
poet.
and is he a teacher at Westchester?
He was a teacher at Westchester when I was there in the mid to late 90s, but he left. I think he moved to the West Coast and was
Yeah.
teaching, I want to say Santa Cruz. I'm not quite sure. And
Okay.
I don't even know if he's still alive. I'm not sure if he has passed or not.
Well,
But yeah, he was.
I'll tell you the Chris Buckley that I just came across, the Poetry Foundation, Christopher Buckley, the author of over 20 collections of poetry,
That's
including
him.
one Modern History, Rolling the Bones, White
That's
Shirt.
him.
That's you. So if people are interested in following up on
Yeah.
that, Christopher Buckley, just go Christopher Buckley poet. It'll take you to his information. But before you do that, get yourself a copy of Rugman by David
Hmm.
Amadio. It's a wonderful read. You can see it's a nice short read. It's a fun
Yeah, it's
read.
a breezy
I,
read.
I I don't have time these days to do the 600-page books, but I love
No.
one where I can get sit down and have a great experience with and a satisfying experience reading it. And I think personally one of the things that makes it so satisfying is that it's so well structured, well laid out. And so maybe when we get you back another time and talk a little bit more about that, because you're teaching the things that people need to know. Anyone who wants to be a writer, you need to understand. I think the most important takeaway of today is the value of understanding structure.
Yep. The internal workings. Yeah, all that stuff that goes on behind the scenes, that the scaffolding, the bones of the thing are
The
very important.
bones,
Yeah.
exactly, the bones. Well, David, I will look forward to maybe coming up and sharing some pizza with you. We'll meet
Oh,
at
I would love it.
Ravanisi's, which is right.
Yeah,
You go
man.
buy it when you're way home from work every day,
Yeah, we'll
and
go. We'll
we'll
go.
keep this conversation going. Thanks for writing a great book. Good luck
Oh,
on
you're
the future
welcome.
books that you've got coming. And those of you who are listening to us today, go ahead and find Rugman and keep David Amadio on your radar. And as his career unfolds, you can say you learned about it here first on Pizza Quest.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you so much, David. Best of
All right.
success.